Hi, I'm Cynthia Ruchti, and I'll be reading Chapter 1 from my latest novel, Afraid of the Light. That acrid, choking smoke smell. Cam caught a whiff of it, or her mind did, every time she walked a path from the curb to a client's home. Paper, cloth, wood, shingles burning. She couldn't let herself consider anything else beyond that. She rechecked the address she'd been given. It wasn't often she crossed a mowed, relatively tidy lawn when approaching a new client. The address was correct, and the drapes were drawn tight or shades pulled down on all the windows. All of them. It must be the place. Another client afraid of the light. A frequent guest on Camille's Let in the Light podcast, her producer Shyla's favorite, Allison Chase had finally agreed to engage Dr. Brooks's services. From their introductory phone call, Camille suspected what she'd see when Allison opened the door today, if she opened the door. But that lawn, freshly mowed and tidy. Curious. Empty, barren window boxes hung beneath smudged windows on either side of the centered front door of the ranch-style home. The paint color, faded blue, made it look like tired, bleached jeans, probably built in the 80s, probably not updated in almost the 40 years since. Camille tossed the judgmental thought and drew a steadying breath before knocking. Here we go again. It wasn't a prayer exactly, more like a rallying cry. If God was listening, all the better. She waited. Her stomach growled. She should have eaten lunch an hour ago. Now, depending on how the appointment progressed and what she found behind the door, she might not eat for hours. The line drape for the window on the left moved. Others might not have caught the movement. Camille knew to look for it. Her knock had been heard. She'd been observed. Steps 1 and 2 in gaining entrance. She adjusted her quilted purse, machine washable, a necessity, on her shoulder. Its bright turquoise and pink pattern should seem less threatening than a black attaché or an alligator print laptop case. It had worked to break down barriers before. Click, click, click. Camille counted 5 deadbolt clicks before the door opened an inch. State your name. The voice sounded more apologetic than demanding. Good afternoon, Mrs. Chase. I'm Dr. Brooks, Camille Brooks. I'm so glad to finally meet you. Tone down the exuberance, Camille. Too much happy can scare off a person in this woman's state of mind. Allison. My first name's Allison. Yes, I remember. From our chats. You said I could come over today and talk with you face to face. Is that still okay? Podcast listeners had described Camille's voice as soothing, comforting, that her midnight broadcast helped them sleep, of all things. She hoped her voice came across as non-threatening now. You won't stay long? Camille smiled. Textbook question. No, not today. Not unless you want me to. Textbook answer. The door swung open a little less than the width of Camille's hips. She turned sideways and shimmied through the space. It closed quickly behind her. 5 clicks. The darkness wasn't unexpected, deeper and thicker than merely stepping from outside to inside. The smell surprised her, though. Lily of the Valley. Her olfactory system had been prepared for rancid, moldy, or at best stuffy. It wasn't prepared for Lily of the Valley. The diminutive woman stepped away from the door. Let me turn on another light. Another? Allison reached across a tower of mismatched boxes, angled her body to avoid a pile of a dozen or more blankets, and flicked on a table lamp. It stood 4 feet tall. Only the top of the shade was visible behind the stack. Camille hadn't expected Lily of the Valley or a client who looked like her mother. Same pale eyes rimmed in darker blue, the outer corners tilted down as if already halfway to a frown. Same wispy, shoulder-length blonde hair that seemed unsure of its role on the woman's head. Same, yes, same open button-down sweatshirt cardigan, different shade of gray. Allison flicked at her hair. Camille made eye contact and reined in her renegade thoughts. It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Chase. You too. Allison tugged her cardigan closed. You'll need a place to sit. She moved through the room without waiting for an answer, surveying the stacks, rejecting several possible options, and moving to the next. Where do you usually sit, Allison? The woman brightened. Over here, I keep all my things handy. She pointed to an upholstered glider rocker and ottoman, surrounded on 3 sides by walls of magazines and books, most of them cookbooks, Camille noted, and well-worn classics. You take your favorite chair then, Allison, and I'll... This next step wouldn't be easy. Camille considered moving a plastic tote closer to where Allison now sat, a makeshift place to sit, but for her client's anxiety's sake, she couldn't disturb the disordered order. Would it be okay if I use this straight back chair? I can set these books right over here for now. You can't use that chair. This could get interesting. It only has 3 legs. This one then? Camille rested her hand on the back of another, not a match to the first. 3 legs. I'm kind of partial to chairs with 3 legs. Allison shrugged as if that were all the explanation necessary. Camille bent to look. Both chairs were propped with piles of bricks where a leg should be. I don't mind standing for a while. That might work. Allison's chin quivered. For now. The woman offered a barely there smile. For now. Smoke. Camille smelled smoke again. And that persistent lily of the valley. A candle burned somewhere in the room. There it was on top of the age television. Not safe, but a whole lot of trust building would have to come first before Allison would be ready to have Camille warn her of the danger. Camille shifted her position so she couldn't see the candle's flame and the way it danced awkwardly, mocking her. One woman's anxieties at a time. Allison's first. I suppose you want me to tell you I'm ready to get rid of this stuff, Allison said, gaze fixed firmly on her hands in her lap. I'd be surprised if you were ready, Allison. Camille focused on the hands too, pale and soft with short, even nails, like her mother's. Allison's fingernails sported the remnants of what looked like weeks-old pink paint polish. The woman picked at what little remained. I'm honored you invited me in, Allison. The woman looked up. Funny word, honored. Not one I would have chosen. What would you have said if our roles were reversed? Camille asked. She waved off the question. No, I'd really like to know. Allison surveyed her domain. Camille watched as Allison took note of every tilting pile, every stain, every stack and bundle and nameless bag. One barely navigable path wove through the chaos, and even it was littered with remains of past days. How was there room for tears to form and stay? Mortified. What? The cardigan sides overlapped. I'd be mortified to step into a place like this. It's your home, Allison. Camille tiptoed carefully with her words. Her work with a client like Allison hung on fragile threads of trust. I don't know many who would call it a home. They'd call it a disgusting mess. Isn't normal. Is that why you listen to the podcast? Why you allowed me in? Because you're looking for normal? Lily of the Valley fought for dominance over a rancid smell wafting from what Camille assumed was the kitchen beyond the sheet curtain doorway. Waiting for Allison's answer would be easier if she didn't have to breathe. Outsiders assumed Camille had grown nose blind to the odors in the homes of her hoarder clients. Desensitized maybe, but certainly not nose blind. Something scritched across metal in a nearby room. Cam had long ago trained herself not to flinch. Mice, Allison said. Not proud of that, but what's a person to do? My cat used to take care of them. Camille had to ask. You have a cat? Had a cat. She disappeared. Well practiced, Camille kept her facial expression in check. Somewhere in the rubble of a decaying life lay a decaying feline that might never be found. Freedom, Allison said softly. I don't want normal. I want freedom. But what? No amount of letters behind your name can give me that, Dr. Brooks. Camille would have argued, but she was right. Can I change my answer? Allison's tears glistened in the underachieving light from two small lamps and one struggling candle. Sure. My children. I want my children back. Allison would have no way of knowing why Camille paused so long before answering. No way of knowing what Camille would have given to have heard those words more than a decade ago. How old are your children? She asked, deflecting her own thoughts from where they drifted. Mid-20s, Allison said. One is forever a newborn. Cognitive issues, a disability? Leah lives in Stafford. Ryan's moved. I'm not sure where. He won't give me his address. He calls at Christmas. Did Ryan fear his mom was going to drop in unexpectedly, a woman who rarely left her house? Why refuse to give his mother his address? Camille waited again. No more information. Forever a newborn? Oh, Allison had lost a child. Another piece of the puzzle. Camille stored the information with well-honed memory tools. She'd watched her clients grimace when she scribbled notes as they spoke, as if every sentence were an indictment against their character. Jotting a note had completely shut down communication in the early days of her practice. Allison, do you want to talk about your other child? No, and don't ask again. The woman flattened her palms on her chest as if her breasts ached. Okay, you said you want your children back. I assume that means you haven't seen Leah or Ryan for a while. They haven't been here to visit. I discussed them. Allison, Dr. Brooks. Her voice held a tinge of impatience. Look at me. Look at what I've become. They say I care more about my things than I do about them. Is that true? Of course not. But they won't come back until I fix this. Her face registered crippling pain. And I can't fix it. Neither can I. Camille got the reaction she expected. Shock replaced Allison's pained expression. Then why are you here? Because, Camille said, this calls for teamwork. Maybe you and I together can make some progress. That word progress makes you anxious, doesn't it? Tread carefully. Allison? The real problem is that I just don't have enough storage space. She looked like a first grader trying to convince her teacher that a dog really did crave the taste of homework. You and I both know storage is a small part of what you're facing. I can rent another storage unit. Yes, she'd suspected. Another one, Allison? How many do you have now? 4 or 5, 6 maybe. Camille tilted her head. Imagine what you could do with the money that's now being spent on storage rental. Just imagine. It's not that much. Well, think about it for a moment. How much per month? Oh, I got a good deal because I have so many. Allison shrank into her cardigan. Around here, I'd guess you're paying somewhere around $100 a month for each unit, right? Well, not quite that much. Well, let's use 100 as a guesstimate to make the math easier for me. 5 or 6 units means $600 a month times 12 months equals more than $7,000 a year. Allison shifted in her chair. What would you do, Allison, if you had $7,000? It won't happen. Camille brushed a feather from her slacks. A feather? Maybe Allison hadn't noticed her action. Play along for a moment with me, please, Allison, okay? I'm not a dreamer, Dr. Brooks. She rubbed her jaw as if trying to knead a knot of tension. Not a dreamer anymore. Ah, an opening. When you did dream, Camille said, years ago, she slowed the pace of her sentence. How would you have answered the question then? A lawnmower revved up a few houses away. Camille picked up the sound despite the extra sound insulation a hoarder's house always provided. It's foolishness to think about it. Allison twirled the series of rings on her left hand, 2 per finger. I suppose I would have said back then that I'd visit my sister. My sister Charlotte lives in Charlotte. I always thought she moved there on purpose just so she could raise eyebrows when she was introduced at work or parties. 7,000 would allow you to do much more than that. The childlikeness in Allison's eyes made Camille's heart clench. It was as if Allison were peeking through the slats of a fence at a magical world on the other side. This is hard. I know. Cam would wait however long it took for Allison to give birth to the words. Okay, I'd rent a cottage on a beach somewhere warm and host my children and grandchildren for Thanksgiving, all of us together, laughing and playing games and digging our toes in the sand. I'd watch the littlest ones while their parents took the older ones into the water. And the sky would be a color I couldn't imagine, and the sun would feel so good on my skin, like a brush of angel wings. And the babies would let me hold them however long I wanted. And right after Thanksgiving dinner at a big long table on the patio, dinner that I made for them, with everybody there, my kids would call me mama, and it wouldn't sound like a curse word. Camille shoved aside the pale statistics of hoarders who fully recover and made a mental note to do everything in her power to help Allison realize that dream.